me know if you can hear me. And I'm on today with Solsacra, so if you want to say hello as well, they can check for sound
Hey,
as well. So if everyone lets me know the voice balance first of all, because remember last time the voice balance wasn't great, so if people let me know what the relative voice balance is between the two of us, and then I can adjust as necessary. I should be able to adjust a little bit easier this time round. Hi, Mahal. Now I'm going to move my Discord thing over there. So it's all fine. All right, good stuff. So basically, it's usual thing where we can just basically ask anything we want. But I would envisage this largely being about Battle for Azeroth. Now I'll just go over for anyone who is not aware yet, just while people are thinking what questions they want to throw in there or things they want to discuss. So we had a couple of changes to our DPS cooldown. Obviously, we should know, although I had someone asking me just today about the global cooldown thing, so just make sure everyone was up to speed on that one. So Avenging Wrath is on the global cooldown. But it's also been changed, this build. So instead, what it previously did was 35% damage and healing for 20 seconds. Now it's 20% damage and healing, but also increases your crit chance by 20%, which I don't know whether you've looked into it, Solsacra. To me, sounds like it might be a slight buff. But have you got any thoughts on that?
it is a slight buff, a little bit. I think it's somewhere around 40% increase,
Yeah.
whereas otherwise it was like 35%,
Yeah.
something like that.
So that actually sounds like it's going to be making it a little bit stronger. But sort of to go with that as well, Crusade sort of works the same in BFA, but it lasts 25 seconds, so it's going to last 5 seconds longer than baseline Avenging Wrath, which might be a bit weird if we switch between them. And increases the damage and haste, so it doesn't affect crit, it's only damage and haste by 3%, but it stacks up to 10 times this time. So that's where we are with those two particular cooldowns. Now, I've had a few people come in with some questions. So again, while I'm just waiting for someone to type something in, I guess we could go through one of those. One of which, where is it now, is the Divine Hammer one, because I personally sort of quite like Divine Hammer, but I gather basically it came down to a choice between Divine Hammer and Consecration. And I think what my thoughts on it were, I would prefer Divine Hammer personally, but everyone seems to like Consecration for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a toss-up either way. Obviously, Divine Hammer is great for mobility, but I think Consecration ultimately is what they're going to go with because it provides a better, stationary planning for when you're dealing with, AoE.
Yeah, I mean, they've improved it a little bit, haven't they? Because now the duration is much less than the cooldown on it. So if you can trust your tank to stand still for like 6 seconds or so, you can actually get some use out of it now.
Yeah, and with that long cooldown and the short duration, it's much more impactful than Divine Hammers ever would be. Right? Because it would have to
Yeah.
modify Blade of Justice, and then you'd be dealing with whatever that AP coefficient is versus what Consecration is.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just quite nice just to have, for me, just something constantly going and just moving through things. And also the fact that you could start it going before an encounter and then, you get a quick tick and then use it again. I used to quite like that when we were using it.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be some clever gameplay lost with it. Sure, the passive cleave element is more or less gone, but
I suppose.
I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other,
Yeah.
especially with Consecration in its current state. I'm actually quite happy with it.
I mean, I know some people have been concerned. I was streaming today. If you get enough haste, actually, the rotation feels okay. But obviously, the other thing they've done is slowed us down a bit. Crusader Strike's gone up in, the recharge time's gone up. Judgment, they initially reduced it and then that's gone up again. But I suppose with something like Consecration, if there's a few active targets, there's Consecration, potentially Hammer of Wrath at certain points. Those sort of things can, be used to reduce the amount of downtime you've got as well for people that like those.
And I mean, as far as I'm aware, the Crusader strike cooldown change or reduction from where it currently is still on the table. But I believe they're waiting for what the items team has in place for Azerite modifications.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, of course. That could affect... I mean, there could be ones on that increase our haste. It also depends, I suppose, what haste we're going to end up with, because I remember in WoD I had hardly any haste all the way through progress, basically. Legion we've had more than I had then, but it's not. It's sort of, for me anyway, been bouncing around the 23%-ish. I think it's a bit higher now. But
yeah,
it depends what we're at. Because I was doing something last night on Alpha and had about 27% haste, and it actually felt fine. It felt okay.
27%, damn, that's quite a bit. What level are you, like 119 or something?
It was 118, but it was with a quest buff that buffed my secondary stats. So it wasn't from my gear. My gear gives me about 17%, but I had a buff from a quest, like a temporary buff placed on me for it. Because, you know, Horde get all the good buffs, and then Alliance, what do we get? We get like a blunderbuss.
Yeah, right. That's the thing that a lot of players aren't expecting. With the current divisor rates on a lot of the secondary stats, the difference between 118 and 120 is like triple the divisor count. So at like 120, you're going to have like 10% haste at best with the way things are now, which isn't going to pan out very well for us since we're so haste centric.
Well, yeah, this is exactly it. The one when I sort of level up, I always have this thing about trying to choose when I'm replacing any gear. Try to choose the one with haste on it so that I don't lose too much every time I level up. Because even though you know you're not getting weak, you just feel, or I feel, weaker because suddenly I'm being slowed down every time I get a level.
Yeah, not a great feeling.
So let's have a look. So let's get through some questions here. I'm not sure if you know anything. I don't know anything about PvP, but it says, do PvP balance issues have direct impact on PvE stats? I wouldn't have thought so, because don't they do different things now?
I don't know. I'm unaware what they're doing in Battle for Azeroth for PvP stat templates, but I'm pretty sure they have a template, right? So whatever you have on your gear isn't ultimately going to matter. What stats you can pursue, because you're going to have the same amount regardless of what you do. Yeah,
because all I know of it is through Legion. I've kept seeing updates where they're going to increase or decrease stats or the benefit of stats for PvP on various classes. So I would think the PvP team did their own thing on that. So let's have a look. So someone's saying if enough mobs can be gathered up, then you like Consecrate, but in Mythic Plus runs it's almost always mobile. But you didn't like Divine Hammers for the long cooldown and limited Holy Power generation.
Yeah.
I mean, again, ideally what you want is a tank who, once they've gathered them up, can stand still for a bit. I mean, the situation now is the Consecration. It's like now, Consecration basically lasts the same as the duration. But in BFA, it doesn't. So you're getting more of that damage in a shorter amount of time. So if you can
it's much more manageable.
Yeah, so if you just wait for them to stand still for a few seconds, then put it down and tell them not to move, then you should be able to get more use out of it. Oh, now here's the $1 million question, because it wasn't looking like this last time you showed me some sims, but are secondary stats ever going to overtake primary stats in BFA like they did in Legion?
No. Because of the way the AP calculations work, everything has a base attack power coefficient factored into the weapon damage, plus the AP coefficient again of the actual spell itself. So I think primary stats are always going to be at least double the strength of secondary stats.
So we're always going, or almost always going to be want to take highest item level, except potentially on Azerite armor, I guess.
Presumably. I mean, that would depend on what the bonuses on the Azerite armor are. But if what we've seen on the alpha is any indication of what they ultimately will be, then I don't think it'll matter either way.
Well, I mean, that was something that confused me because I was looking at what was it, Slootbag's interview, and they said something about because someone was picking on the top row, which obviously we've only got one piece of Azerite armor at the moment, which is so annoying me. Because I'd rather they didn't bring that out at all until they could bring all of it out, or at least a lot of it out.
Mhm.
But you've
Yeah.
got a generic on the top row. You've got a generic one, and then you've got one for each spec. And Blizzard said, oh, but it's only advisory because other specs can also benefit from it. But you look at the Paladin one. The Holy one is for Light of the Martyr. Well, that's only Holy can ever use that. I've forgotten what the prot one is, but I think that's Avenger's Shield or something. So it's definitely a prot only ability. So it's only the Ret one that can also be used by the other specs.
Yeah, it's very strange. I do remember someone saying, I think it was one of the live interviews that the press did with Blizzard recently. Somebody there mentioned that we would be able to respec Azerite armor for some cost, presumably gold. So, I mean, that could be a decent way of dealing with it across multiple specs.
So I'm not. Well, it may have been covered in several interviews then, because that was also covered in Slootbags. And what they said was, yes, you'll be able to respec, but at the moment they're trying to work out how often they're happy with you respecing. Now I thought to myself, surely they don't want us farming more than one of the very same piece of Azerite armor. So wouldn't the solution just to be to allow tomes, as well as resetting your talents, you can also reset your Azerite pieces and follow the same rules. So maybe you can't use it in Mythic Plus, but you can use it out of combat or in a rest area, somewhere else.
Yeah, that would, as far as I can see, I can tell, that would probably be
just to me. I don't understand why they're still thinking about that now that they've announced the actual release date. It's like, yeah, we still don't really know what we want you to do with Azerite armor. Just one of the... I think about it now, there's hardly anything actually to test in terms of new features. When I thought about it, we can test islands, we can test our classes, we can test the zone. I've done the zones now, but we've only got about half of the... We haven't even... No, I don't think there's even half of the dungeons out. None of the dungeons on Heroic. The professions are not really testable in a serious way. Azerite armor is not really, because we can't tell just from a starter piece what it's supposed to be like. And Warfronts aren't, so 4 months to do it all.
Yeah, I mean, if all the features are more or less present, then it's just a matter of tuning and implementing, what else could go in there.
Yeah.
So I do have hope for the Azerite system. I'm just not very impressed right now. They did really shoot themselves in the foot with introducing the system with what was there. That's, first impressions are often mean a lot.
Yes, I mean, I think someone was saying earlier about the Azerite, because again, all we can do is look at the chest piece that's currently in. Someone was saying, so if you're a pure DPS class, then you've got a choice of the second row are all DPS traits. But like for a Paladin, there's one tanky one healy one, and one DPS one.
Right.
So again, I don't know whether that's an intended pattern across all of them, which would be a bit annoying because it'd be like, well, there's only one for us to take. In that case, there's no choice in the matter at all.
I think it is intended, actually.
So then for us, there'd be no choice, would there? We'd just be picking that one. So, okay. So we've got a question here. It says, so what are your overall thoughts as to where Ret is in the alpha at the moment, and what changes you're still hoping for?
Actually, I'm really pleased with where Ret is in the alpha. I do have a few minor gripes, but that's, generally relating to raid utility, what raid buffs we bring, the design of Blade of Wrath, why is Hammer of Wrath still tied to wings, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to say this morning, my issue before has always been with utility, is when they try and argue how our utility is really good, they'll just look at it in isolation. Like you might say, well, Blessing of Protection, it makes it totally immune to a physical damage, and you can put it on someone else. Sounds awesome. Until in a raid situation, you realise maybe 2 or 3 times in the whole expansion, there will be some fatal physical damage. It's almost all magical damage. And then you look at the length of the cooldowns on these things, and you know, Divine Shield, my gripe with that one has always been it's a much greater cooldown than, say, either Aspect of the Turtle or Cloak of Shadows, and yet both of those abilities were not only just as good for almost everything, but actually better for some things. Like my bubble didn't stop me going into the other realm on Soul Energy boss, I've forgotten its name now. Desolate Host, for example.
Yeah, right. And Cloak and Turtle would prevent that.
And, you know, and I think to myself, I think the example I was given is, so if you designed a tier raid with 12 bosses in it, you might sort of say, because they said, didn't they, that they're going to get some coordination going between, wonder of wonders, between the class design team and the encounter design team. But, you know, if they look at it from the approach of, okay, you know, make sure that every class brings something useful for one of those bosses, that's not really great, because if it's the first boss, you don't have to have an ideal comp for it, you're just going to roll it over anyway. Whereas if it's one of the 2 or 3 really tough bosses, you suffer a lot more from not having the classes that really help you out on those. So if you happen to be one of the classes that helps you out on one of those bosses, you're sort of almost essential for the whole tier.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the problem, you know, oftentimes, and I'd be surprised if they didn't do this. Like you said, they're primarily measuring these things in a vacuum with no real applicable aspects of these abilities. So I don't think it's something they're ever going to get right. I mean, try as they might, it's just, you know, the deck is stacked against them. I don't think they're ever going to deliver on something that could meaningfully see good class representation across the board, especially with the harder bosses. Because they're always going to do something crazy like Coven, where if you don't bring dot classes, you're not going to kill the boss, and if you don't bring Death Knights on Agrimar, you're not going to beat him either.
Well, you're not going to do it quickly anyway. We basically, well, at the time we had 1 Warlock and 1 Shadow Priest. We had a Boomkin, but they weren't doing that much. Yeah, and it just took us a very long time because we had a load of melee as well, which didn't help.
Yeah,
but so it's definitely
not a fun experience.
No, I absolutely hated that boss on Progress. I loathed it. I wouldn't have minded being sat at all. But so let's have a look. Do we already know which raid buffs Paladin will bring? I don't think we know anything until they actually put it in the alpha, do we?
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing, but I know what I'd like them to do is like bring back Greater Blessing of Might, like the Legion iteration of Might. But instead of a single player or 3 different players you throw it on, it's raid-wide. You know, at least that way we bring some sort of DPS buff that applies to all classes, whereas some other classes' DPS buffs, like Warriors, for example, only applies to melee.
Yes.
So it would be kind of a niche for us that we bring something for everyone.
Yeah, well, as long as they stay within 40 yards of us if it's an aura, yeah. So... because I remember I was quite dismayed at the first iteration of them where we were going to like get this armor aura buff, because even if that did something with spell damage as well, my issue is a defensive aura is, I mean, if it's passive, it's only going to be so much, and also it's only useful if it would definitely save someone. So it's not enough to be used on a fight where there's going to be a lot of raid-wide damage. If it still doesn't save people, then it's no good. But also, when there isn't that situation, then it's totally useless, whereas a damage buff is always useful. You know, it doesn't matter whether the boss is easy or hard, you always benefit from more damage.
Right.
Except for,
I mean, even for us, if they did do that might thing that I was suggesting, you know, it's quantifiable. People can see the actual amount it brings, you know. Yeah,
that's right. I remember actually going back to TBC, because I used to try and argue that we were useful just like Shaman, because everyone went mad for Shamans because of Wind Fury Totem. I think when Wind Fury Totem was dropped, you suddenly saw your numbers getting bigger. Whereas I used to keep arguing, but you know, Judgment of Crusade was really good because it gave everyone effectively 3% crit. But they didn't see that because it was a small amount across the whole fight. Whereas Wind Fury Totem, they knew about it then. So
right, yeah. Whereas also
is good.
Wind Fury only applying to a single group. And that 3% we brought was for the entire raid.
Yes.
You know, that was a big buff back then.
But yeah, I couldn't, you know, and I was in a good guild then, but you still couldn't get them to appreciate it because it wasn't big numbers all the time. You just had to show the math. Look, he's doing this. I can't show you it, but you know it's there.
Yeah. And that's another thing I'd like to see is, you know, shamans with Wind Fury.
Would you?
Oh yeah. No, everybody's got to bring something. You
yes,
know?
Yeah. Well, they certainly don't bring retribution passives because, you know, they seem to cheat their way out of it.
I'm kind of in a love-hate relationship with that passive.
I just despise it completely. And, you know, although they've nerfed it, I don't understand why it's there. Because if they're, you know, if they're so determined to have this thing for class fantasy, which it's not, why isn't it all of the paladin specs that have it then if it's class fantasy? Or in some mode, like maybe the holy paladins do more healing. Right, well done, you killed someone, now you can do more healing on the people that you've left alive. But at the very least, they could change it to a non-damage thing. They know that it doing damage causes issues. You know, because we know that, like I pointed out, Sisters of the Moon was the great one for me, because one time I was streaming and you know, it was just carnage one night. It was just utter carnage. And I came top damage, and I said, look, I just do the same thing as I've done every single week, but my percentile for this fight will be way ahead of what it's been for the last few weeks. And sure enough, it was. And it's just because of that, you know, the fact that I had that passive up almost, well, not almost all the time, but almost all the time when I had wings up.
Yeah.
And just that effect. So even reducing it, I don't understand whether to replace it with something. Or just keep it as the defensive thing. Or just make us glow yellow or something, I don't know.
Yeah, that could be something. Like a small aura around the paladin that provides damage reduction when somebody else dies.
Yeah, or it could just throw out a smart heal or something like that on someone nearby, a little one, not major, or an absorb shield, something of little consequence. Or maybe they could put it across the whole class and it does a different thing for each spec.
Yeah, I could see that too. But, you know, it is, you know, it's literally named Retribution, so you'd have to think to some degree that it's, you know, specifically intended for us, or Rets in general.
That's just a name thing. They can easily change the name. It's a bit like my argument with Shield of Vengeance, which I wasn't sure, actually. I thought it might have burst after I wasn't being damaged today, but the tooltip certainly, I forgot to check it, actually. The tooltip certainly still says that you have to consume the whole thing for it to do damage.
Yeah, the tooltip's definitely wrong. It definitely bursts on expiry, regardless of the damage.
Right, I thought it did, because I had a situation where I killed something, and then I was walking away and it burst, and I aggroed a neutral mob nearby. And I thought, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But I didn't go back and check it. I forgot. So, right, so it's just the tooltip that's wrong. So it actually does, yeah, it is going to burst for its damage. Well, that's better. I mean, it's still not going to be used defensively, but at least it can now be. You can guarantee doing some damage with it, because there's nothing worse than just being left with a small amount of the absorb shield left, which you can't get rid of, and then just watch it tick down.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the whole part of the toxicity behind the ability. You know, it was kind of in this weird contradictory state where, you know, you'd pop a defensive cooldown, but the idea was, oh, I gotta make sure this defensive cooldown disappears and I take some damage just to be sure that I deal the damage with it. So it kind of like the entire idea of it went out the window.
Well, it was just used offensively. I mean, I was saying, like, when I was doing Mythic Argus, which thank God is dead now, I was just treating myself as if I was a player with no defensives. I just approached every situation like, I will have used my Shield of Vengeance when I knew it would be consumed for the damage. And especially in Phase 3, I can't have bubble up for every time. So I just made sure that I was on full health for every one of the, like, rages that went out or whatever. You know, I just behaved as if I don't have a defensive to use in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, on a fight like that where the damage income to the players is so high that Shield of Vengeance doesn't really count for anything.
No.
I mean, really, all you have is some other dingus dying, so you get Retribution, or you have Divine Shield, and that's really it.
Because they have effectively buffed it a bit in BFA as well, haven't they? In terms of what it can absorb.
Shield of Vengeance? Oh, yeah, it's easily triple of what it is in Legion.
So it may actually be fairly useful then. And again, there might be Azerite armor traits that reduce the cooldown of it as well. Possibly. So let's have a look. How's the GCD change feeling? See, it doesn't really... The GCD change doesn't really affect that much. Obviously, it just means that when you press it, you can't straight away go into a spender. But I've sort of got used to it now on the alpha.
Yeah, I mean, for us, Ret Paladins, we've only got Avenging Wrath for our primary cooldown, right? So it's pretty inconsequential for us. You know, you look at other classes like Frost Death Knights or Fury Warriors, and they're destroyed by this change, essentially. So I wouldn't worry about it for us. But there are some things that are on the GCD that probably shouldn't be.
Well,
and
Bubble
namely, that's Divine Steed.
Yeah, well, Divine Steed, Divine Shield. Like, Shield of Vengeance is off, but not Divine Shield.
Because Divine Shield is a straight-up immunity. It's going to block all incoming damage, whereas Divine Shield is just an absorb.
Well, for my money, they could just change it to 90% and I'd be happy. And then maybe they can remove it then.
Yeah.
But, But so, I mean, I've just generally not liked the idea of having a GCD on a non-throughput ability. You know, something that you would use reactively. I don't see the sense in it, because I mean, I remember in WoD on Gruul, when the first time we killed Gruul, and he berserked, and he quickly turned around and smacked me, and I could see on the replay, the video replay, I was depressing my bubble button, but it was just, you know, as he was killing me, so it didn't go off. And a situation like that, I'm thinking, well, if something really reactive, if I can hit it and I know it's going to work, that would be a lot better.
Yeah, it's actually a good case in PvE for that being true. But in PvP, oftentimes you're faced with a choice of, you know, using another offensive ability or using a defensive ability on the GCD to save yourself.
Yeah.
You know, there's a dynamic there in PvP that encourages some intelligent thought, which is something I agree with.
That, yeah. But the thing is,
but in PvP, it's totally different. PvE, it's a totally different game.
But abilities do work slightly different in PvP and PvE, or can do anyway. So.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And now that we're going to have this war mode, which is another thing that's not available to test in the alpha yet, then you can basically separate PvP and PvE completely, surely. You can just have it, if you're war mode off, your Divine Shield is off the global cooldown, and if you're in a raid or a dungeon, it's off the global cooldown. And that would, you know, there's potentially for BFA complete separation of PvE and PvP.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, that would be nice, actually. I never really thought about that. No, difference would be much more quantifiable, and it's not like you're going and doing world quests and getting blown up because some frost mage decided you should be.
Well, I mean, it's mostly on my alts where I find it annoying. On my main, because it's quite well geared. I mean, I had someone telling me that, you know, it's only like really well geared players that seem to beat them up, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it's just the really well geared players are experienced enough to look at someone's health bar first, so they steer clear of me. They don't know I'm crap at PvP. So I mostly seem to get attacked by people with like 2 million health. So I can actually afford to stand there, scratch my ass for a bit while I wait up the situation, and then hit them once and kill them.
Yeah.
Do we know if Kulturans can be paladins? We don't know anything about it at the moment. They've only just confirmed that we can have them at all, and not at the start of the expansion. No
idea. I mean, I know they're going to be able to be druids, so
yeah.
I don't know how much room that leaves for them to be paladins, but I guess we'll have to see.
I mean, I kept wondering about all the paladin, albeit placeholder, but paladin iconography that was in Borrelus. So there was the statue of Uther taken from Stormwind, although that's now changed to a cannon, so they've actually replaced that now. But the Silver Hand tomb is still there. Again, I can't imagine it's supposed to be left there, but it is still there at the moment. They haven't replaced that yet. But Borrelus seems to be coming on quite slowly. I think it's quite a complicated thing.
I haven't spent much time on Alliance side on the Alpha. I mean, I did level a character on the Alpha side, on the Alliance side, but I never spent much time in that zone,
Yeah.
whatever the hell it's called.
Do you know? I can't remember the name of that zone now. But well, I've lost my Alliance Paladin. You know, it's level 119 on Vol'dun, and every time I log in, it disconnects. So I'm gonna have to delete it and create another one now. So that's what I've been on my Horde. So I've got my Horde one at 119. I've got to start again on Alliance one.
I just told off. And there's actually, as far as I know, there's a wipe coming in like the next 2 weeks.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't think they didn't do that in Legion. I thought they might have decided against it for this as well.
Yeah, they did it once in Legion that I can remember, and that's when they swapped from Alpha to Beta.
Oh, I don't remember that then. Right. Well, there's still a few other classes I need to practice about with as well. I'm still trying to decide what I want to use for my main ult. So I think this question's come up before. Do we think eye level is more reliable marker than having to sim everything? I mean, better. I mean, for rings, you're still gonna. It's not gonna help you much, is it? Because
yeah, for rings, it's something you're gonna need to sim.
Yeah.
Trinkets, you're gonna need to sim it. General
Azerite
gear, though,
pierces.
Yeah, you could probably trust the eye level increase and just equip that. And like Thete said, yeah, Azerite, that's going to be a huge indicator of what you do.
How much of a hassle is that going to be if they suddenly drop like 50 different traits that you've got to get into Simcraft?
It won't be a hassle. I think the biggest hassle there would just be getting the item.
Because at the moment there's just nothing to really look at again in terms of I just don't know when they're gonna. If I suppose if a wipe is if they're gonna do beta in the next couple of weeks, maybe that they said that they're gonna release beta when it's feature ready, didn't they? So that presumably means war fronts, war mode, Azerite armor, all the rest of the dungeons, and professions will all have to be suddenly dropped in.
Mm-hmm. All the professions are there.
They're there, but you can't really do, like, for example, I've noticed only with this build can you now skin things, but I've gone around multiple zones, and in some zones there's no mining nodes or herbing nodes at all, and some of them they're few and far between. I haven't actually checked if I can disenchant something this build, but you couldn't last build, and you couldn't mill either, or prospect. That may have changed this week. So in terms of actually getting the raw materials to craft anything, it's been tricky to impossible depending on the profession. So yeah, the vendors have been in for a couple of builds, but you've not been able to do very much with them.
I did not know that.
Let's have a look. So wasn't reforging more user-friendly to an average player than having to sim gear? I mean, you'd have to sim your stat weights at least, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, you'd also need to sim your stat weights, but every permutation of changes that you could apply to those gear through reforging. So no, reforging was way worse than what we have now for, asking a question of what should and shouldn't be used as far as gear is concerned.
I mean, I know a lot of people would have liked reforging in Legion when we were having a situation where, I remember my first mythic Eye of Ashara, and I got a ring at the end of it. It was very high item level, but it had mastery on it. I was like, I'm not using this. And the warrior in the group was none too pleased because I couldn't trade it. But at least reforging in that situation, maybe I would have been able to use it.
Yeah. Alternatively, though, they could just do a better job with tuning secondary stats, and that wouldn't be a problem in the first place.
I mean, ours were relatively close together compared to some. I mean, Shadow Priests would just take haste no matter what, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing, but I think that's just an artifact of how the class is designed. Like, there's some things you can tune with secondary, tuning secondary stats.
Yeah.
But others, it's just systemic.
Right, so another big one. Someone asked, put a question in because they couldn't make it live. In terms of Hammer of Wrath being baseline, so as I understand it, the potential discussions that may be going on are, if it was made baseline, then it would be a pure execute, and with the talent potentially then allowing it to be used during Avenging Wrath. Is that right? And would that be a good thing to do?
I don't know where they are with it right now, but I had suggested that as a change. I think it would be a decent thing to do, but I'm not convinced they would do it. I mean, realistically, you're adding Hammer of Wrath to everyone, right? So
yeah,
they've got a tuning goal to meet for active time, right? And adding Hammer of Wrath might damage that, because realistically speaking, whenever Hammer of Wrath is available, you've got 100% active time anyway. So it's kind of a thin line to tread for them.
I mean, the other thing is, because at the moment when you're looking at the level 100 talents, Crusade presumably has shot up now in value with the changes.
No, it's actually worse than it was for this Avenging Wrath change. Yeah. The buff to Avenging Wrath indirectly nerfs Crusade.
So
they're going to have to buff Crusade. And I mean, I already did the math to figure out what they would need to buff things by to balance that out. But they'd have to nerf Inquisition substantially. They'd have to buff Crusade.
But what would they do with Divine Purpose?
They could just add, 15% extra damage on finishers that are affected by Divine Purpose.
Okay.
That's another one you can't really tune with.
Yeah, that'd be a bit awkward though. So, what if you ended up wanting to refresh your Inquisition or something and wasted it? Because quite a few things to use Holy Power on now, isn't there? That's not damage. So we've got Word of Glory, which is quite a useful heal. And it's what I'm using at the moment because it's actually quite useful.
Yeah, Word of Glory is actually insanely powerful on the alpha right now. And I don't think it's going to stay like that, but hopefully it does.
I mean, because, well, it's been a dual thing because Word of Glory has been substantially buffed. Justicar's Vengeance has been, because they don't want it to be a damage option, significantly nerfed.
Mm-hmm.
I think I worked out one situation where it might be useful to use it for damage, and I think it basically meant Execution Sentence and like Stunned Mob with basically everything on it before it was useful. So it's basically not useful. I was thinking though, another talent, Divine Judgment. So looking at that now, you could, unless you had the Judgment debuff active on your target, in which case you'd use Templar's Verdict, and also depend on other talents, you could actually use that on as few as 2 targets to be buffing the next Judgment, couldn't you?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
So with Divine Judgment, if I use, and I've got 2 targets, and I use my Divine Storm on those 2 targets, that's giving me an extra stack from my next Judgment.
Oh, yeah.
So as long as I've not got the Judgment debuff on the target, then it's worthwhile. It seems to me worthwhile using Divine Storm on 2 targets to buff, because it's worthwhile for the extra damage you're going to get from your next Judgment.
Actually, it's worth it in general to just use Divine Storm on 2 targets if you're spec'd in Divine Judgment.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, the value of that's going to vary based on which other talents you're taking, primarily the level 15 talents. Zeal is going to get the most benefit out of that because you're getting the damage regardless of how many targets are present. RV is definitely the weakest of the 3, though.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of like Righteous. I forgot what it's called. Righteous Vengeance now, is it? The Whisper of the Nathrazim effect.
Righteous Verdict, I believe.
Do you know what? I've got it here somewhere as well. Righteous Verdict. Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay. RV, I just keep remembering it as. Although I suppose useful on a single target boss fight, we can just tunnel for most of the time. I quite like Execution Sentence.
Yeah, no, the new ES is great. Though those talents on that tier are really undertuned. I think Righteous Verdict and Execution Sentence are not much more than 3.5% increases, whereas Zeal is almost 6%.
Right.
So they need substantial buffs.
Yeah. I mean, Hammer of Wrath, I noticed, got a bit of a nerf as well, this build.
Yeah, and the problem with that nerf is that it's no longer, or it's a serious danger of no longer being the ability we want to hit on cooldown.
Yeah, well, that's my worry. If be given that it's only going to be available for certain portions of the fight, if you're not using it when it is available, it seems a bit pointless.
Actually, it feels terrible, yeah. So, and I mean, there's no real reasonable tuning goal where you can tune Hammer of Wrath to be meaningful, while also keeping Fires of Justice and Blade of Wrath comparable, at least.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're talking talents that give 15% DPS increases, and that's insane, you know?
Yeah, again, I mean, there hasn't been, like in Legion, they did a lot of switching things around to try out different combinations, didn't they? They haven't done so much of that this time, where they've just moved them in the talent tree to see if it works better.
Yeah, well,
rows.
I think primarily because we haven't seen so much of that is because they actually listened to the feedback during Legion and understood where the problems were, so they rearranged the talent tree in a way that kind of rectified those issues. But, I mean, for the most part, it's actually pretty good. Like, the biggest issue I see is potentially, you know, where Hammer of Wrath and Divine Purpose are placed.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's some pretty minor gripe.
I mean, I've you know, gone right off Unbreakable Spirit as well. I mean, that's a talent I don't particularly like at the moment. I just think, personally, I mean, coming from a raiding point of view, the reduction in lay on hands doesn't help at all because it's still a once use per fight for most fights.
Yeah, it's still like 7-minute cooldown.
Yeah, I mean, Divine Shield's already got such a hefty cooldown anyway. I don't see why it couldn't just be the old 50% at least. I might take it then. I'm much... Because I think to myself, well, am I really going to take it just for the sake of saving just over a minute? Because unless I think in that window I'm going to need it again, it's unlikely. So I'm thinking more in terms of Cavalier, unless I'm really not going to be moving at all on a fight.
Yeah, well, I'm not very happy with Cavalier because, you know, they did increase the cooldown of Divine Steed recently.
Yes,
right?
it's to a minute.
So the value you're actually getting out of that charge is even smaller than what you would have otherwise. Plus, if we're really being critical of, you know, movement, there's always a better way of dealing with a movement problem than an extra charge on Cavalier could ever solve. Especially in a world where Zeal exists now, because that helps us mitigate the damage loss for being away from a target for extended periods.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Long Arm of the Law was my sort of preferred option there. There's some people said Long Arm of the Law, some people Pursuit of Justice, in terms of bringing those back. I mean, it'd be quite nice from my point of view to be able to say Divine Steed, like let's say you have to move out for a particular mechanic, Divine Steed out and then Long Arm of the Law back in or something like that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But yeah, as far as Unbreakable Spirit is concerned, I think it's overall going to be the best talent on that row. I'm not convinced Eye for an Eye is going to be very good very often because it is physical damage.
Physical, exactly. I mean, that's just one of those things. It was useful on Mistress Sassine, but generally speaking,
right? Yeah.
If the physical damage, if you don't need a defensive for it, then there's no point in taking one as a talent. And if it's not going to save you, so for example on Garothy Worldbreak, it wouldn't only Bop or Bubble will allow you to stay in. You can't use Eye for an Eye on it and still survive. So it's not strong enough for that, and it's you know, too weak for most other things.
Yeah, definitely.
So are you? Oh, you've probably already answered this one as well. Says, are you more excited about Paladin heading into BFA versus in Legion?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't even think you can compare Legion Ret to BFA Ret right now. Like it's a totally different game.
Well, the amount of discussion we seem to have had seems to have improved as well. I haven't upset anyone on the development team this time round.
Yeah.
But Although that being said, I also haven't seen a lot of discussion on the forums itself, but at least there's other ways to discuss these things now.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to get lucky with, the one developer that really cares about, in communication with the community. I mean, we've got base god Sifus, so
yeah,
we lucked out.
Oh, quite, yes. Just need to get him to remove Retribution passive now and make Hammer of Wrath baseline. And give us Blessing of Sacrifice in some form.
Yeah, I'd totally trade Kings for that.
I mean, at the moment, I'm using them while I'm leveling, and I don't know, it's just out of habit, because they're not giving us anything at all. And I don't think it's a surprise at all. So the next question is, were you surprised to see Cephas appear in the Paladin Discord?
Yes and no. I knew he was always, he was always communicating with a lot of other players, especially, I think, in the Rogue Discord. So when I learned he was working on Paladins, I kind of had a feeling he might. But I guess cookies sweeten the pot, or muffins sweeten the pot enough for him to convince himself it was worth doing. Apparently it was, because, it was a productive discussion.
It was, yeah. Yeah, it seemed to go on for quite a while as well. I was surprised about the length of time he spent talking about it. I don't know if any other class discords have encountered a similar thing, because I was sort of hoping, because I got the impression during WOD especially when the community managers started being rude as well, that there was a bit of a them and us fort mentality appearing, because they were getting so much stick over Warlords of Draenor.
Yeah. The whole cynically negative community.
Yeah. So I wondered if this might help to sort of thaw those relationships a little bit. Plus the fact that they've been largely getting praise, I think, for Legion. Rather than I certainly have some criticisms of it. Not least of which the amount of non-raid content I have to do to raid, or had to do at one point.
That was something else. I don't think I've ever played in Legion, in another expansion as much as I have in Legion.
No.
Other expansions I'd probably average something like 90 days over the course of it. Legion, I'm already up to 140, just because of the shit I had to do every day.
Yeah. I mean, I still worry, especially as Blizzard they don't even seem to know themselves what they intend of it, because I was wondering, so we've had to do Mythic Plus for both artifact power and potentially gear at certain points as well, but there's certain points where we needed it for the artifact power. And then I'm thinking for the next expansion, well, does that also mean we need to do a certain amount of Mythic Plus, maybe primarily for gear, and then islands on top of it for Azerite?
I think we will have to, but I'm hoping it's not going to be anywhere near the same extent
so do I.
that we had to in Legion, especially in that gap between Emerald Nightmare and Trial of Valor, where you were farming.
I remember that, yeah.
That was a nightmare.
I mean, I'm not used to spending that much time outside of raids other than just casual stuff. And I was having to spend Friday evenings and a lot of Saturdays as well, getting groups together and doing as much as we could.
Yeah, right.
Someone's saying they should engage in the forums. That's where most people read. I'm not sure it is, because I don't like forums in general terms. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think many people engage in the official forums.
Yeah, I don't think a whole lot of people read the forums, actually.
I mean,
I think most oftentimes when people hear about something, it's from Wowhead or MMO Champion.
I would, if I was like, I don't know, the team in charge of the web, I'd be feeling a bit grim. I did a video yesterday or the day before or something, and there's a thumbnail I used the new artwork with the Sylvanas facing off against Anduin. And someone in the comments said, can someone tell me where this is from, because I can't find it anywhere? And I had to respond, it's from the front page of the World of Warcraft website. So it wasn't just that, it's not just that was the last place they would look, it's not even a place worth looking for that person at least. And that's a bit grim. You would think that'd be your first port of call when there's new information to be announced. Why not go to the WoW forums first? But we don't, we go to Wowhead and MMO Champion. And then discuss it on Discord.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether this Battle.net thing that was supposed, this sort of fake Discord that they've added to it, was supposed to try and redress the balance, but I don't think it's done that. I don't
The
think
whole
anyone,
communities thing.
yeah, I don't think anyone's seriously using that. You hope BFA will be more alt-friendly. It won't. They've already said it's going to be about the same as Legion, which they consider to be alt-friendly, but, you know. I don't think with the amount of... Well, no. With the amount of stuff you have to do, by definition, it can't be as alt-friendly as basically every other expansion. Because in every other expansion, all you had to do was gear your character. Well, now you have to get artifact power legendaries. All right, the legendaries are disappearing, but we have to get Azerite instead and Azerite armor.
Yeah, it's a totally different dynamic from past expansions.
Yeah.
It's not going to be fun. And I mean, if it is going to be similar to Legion, well, we're really not considering legendaries anymore. So
no,
how much more is that going to be placed on Azerite?
Well, that's the thing.
Scary.
You've still got to farm the Azerite armor pieces you need, and depending on how they let you respec them, if there's one where you'd want a few different configurations of it, you might have to get it several times.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you swap traits on your Azerite gear based on spec? No. Like, whatever I equip it, if I change spec, it doesn't change. It doesn't let me choose another configuration. So the armor is just the armor. I mean, there's some things, obviously, it might not be working the same. I noted, for example, I did sort of have an inkling that you might be able to reset them. Because on the... I made a brand new Paladin just to see what the Azerite armor was like for Paladins. And every time I logged out and back in, it reset my choice. Whereas on other characters, it stayed. So there was a bit of a bug there. But it did sort of suggest there was a reset mechanic in it. But Blizzard have actually said we will be able to respec them. They said, you know, they did an interview with Sloopbag. But they also said that they're not sure how yet. And it seems to be because they're still discussing how often they want us doing it. So it doesn't sound like they want it to be as easy as with talents. If you consider that easy. Oh, we got two different answers from Pax, did we? What was the second answer?
Oh, that's always good.
It might just be the way it's been relayed, because until we see the... I mean, Sloopbags, we can actually see the interview.
If you got two head devs with two different opinions on how something's going to work out.
Yeah, well, if they're still discussing it... Oh, so Ian's flatly said they can't be. Well, that's interesting, because another one said they can. And in the alpha, as I say, if you've got a situation where when I log out and back in and it resets, okay, it's not supposed to do that, but it does suggest that there is a reset mechanic in there, doesn't it?
I would think so. But that could just be a data storage problem on their end. No, totally unintentional.
Yeah, so, hold on, what we've got here. Definitely said, you play DPS, you see things from that point of view. Hybrid class like Paladin and Priest, who play specifically DPS, won't have as much. No, we won't have as much choice. So, you know, Paladins get, on the second row, we get one healing, one tanking, and one DPS choice. Priests get two healing and one DPS choice. So, literally, you get, you know, there's like a pool. No one has more than two tanks, so I'm guessing there's just one tanking trait on that one. But... And they're always the same as well. So, because I thought it was funny, so I went on the Warlock. The Warlock was the first pure DPS class I went on to have a look at the Azerite armor, and it had one trait that meant that your attacks did extra physical damage. I thought, well, that was strange, until I realised that for every other pure DPS class, it was exactly the same traits they had a choice of on that second row. So it's obviously the same would apply to rogues, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they should allow for respecs, because that's just going to create a huge diversity problem for a lot of classes. Like, look at druids. They've got four different roles. Four very different roles. That's going to be a nightmare for them. And if you look at, like, a warrior or a rogue, hunter even, not going to worry about shit.
But, well, it's just, I mean, I just look at it as my bags always get full. But... It's one thing if I have to have several different pieces of Azerite for different situations, that's okay. But if I have to have like 3 or 4 of the same Azerite piece, just in different configurations, that's just stupid. You know, that would be absolutely ridiculous.
I think it's ultimately really going to come down to what these traits are, because they could easily define, like, you know, just using warriors as an example, they could easily design the traits to be arms warrior specific, as opposed to fury warrior specific, like buffing bloodthirst instead of mortal strike.
Yeah.
If they really wanted to do that.
They wanted to do that. But again, we might be getting different views. If it is still in discussion, we might be getting developers like you just mentioned on there saying very different things. But the one, you know, they did say with Slootbag that the intention is that it's a suggestion for certain specs, but other ones should be able to use it as well. But you say there, Morales, tomes for scribes, please, to change the traits. I mean, all I would do is I would just make the tomes work with talents and Azerite traits at the same time. There's no reason not to. I don't see a situation where there's any harm in allowing you to change your Azerite traits at the same time as talents. Because they are talents, aren't they? They're the BFA talents.
Mm.
And we might need different ones on different fights.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
If you cannot respec, then everyone will just choose the theoretical best option and never do any experimentation. Or, as Blizzard said we should do with the Netherlight Crucible, pick which one is prettiest.
Right. Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Because that's what this is like then. If there's no respec possible, it's like, or albeit it's not random, you know when you're farming a piece what traits it's got available. But it is going to be in other respects like the Netherlight Crucible. You make your choice. For which at the moment there isn't a message saying, are you sure? Because that was another little thing that I thought, well, if it was supposed to be permanent, it would surely have a comment saying, are you sure you want to pick that one? Because it already looks like one in reverse, because the very last row, or it's not a row, it's just one on its own, is the item level increase. Which I suppose is worth a bit more, because it's also 5 item levels increase, but that's worth more with the item level squish.
Mm-hmm. Well, relatively, it should be the same, but there is the point where, you know, your Azerite armor is a derivative of the Heart of Azeroth and not actually the armor itself. So it's not like you need to farm an exorbitant amount more to use a different piece that you might want to use for a different situation.
Yeah.
So it's, at worst, I think it's going to be, you're going to have to fill 2 entire bags with crap that you situationally use, and you're going to have to keep track of all of them.
Yes.
So that's, I don't know if that's objectively better than any other alternative, but that's kind of what we have now, it sounds like. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I also hope they give me a Legendaries tab, like the Heirloom tab, because I don't know where all my Legendaries are going to go. For Legend.
Yeah.
Are traits going to be static on each piece, or will there be variety? I think in each piece, I don't think they're intended to be random. I think, like, if you farm, you know, Azerite armor of the dead troll or something, it will always have the same choice of traits, as I understand it.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So
each individual piece, regardless of the item type, be it normal, heroic, or mythic, is always going to have the same traits.
So you can target them, and you can go, okay, well, my Bis one drops from that dungeon. Oh, that's the dungeon no one ever wants to run. Then try and find yourself a group to run it.
Yeah, much like relics in Legion.
Yeah. But, oh, God, I just thought, with Mythic Plus, it's going to be like trying to find specific keys all the time, isn't it?
It could be, yeah.
So that could give a lead into people who want their characters boosting, like in the old days, if your shitty geared character got on more souls +7 or something, you'd suddenly find 4 Mythic Raiders willing to take you through it.
Yeah. Could happen.
So yeah. Didn't they say there will be functional PvP again for BFA? What do you mean? Oh, PvP gear. Well, they said with the... I don't know. Is this PvP specific gear? I don't really know how PvP even works in Legion anymore. I know with the war mode on, you know, you're going to fill a bar up, and then you get pieces of gear as you do that. And if you keep filling it up and get the whole set, then the next sets of bars will give you better pieces of gear. But I don't know what that gear's like.
Yeah, I mean, that's time is going to tell, but the way I see it with like war mode, I don't think there's any sane player that cared the least bit about power is going to, you know, do regular PvE mode. I think most players are just going to gravitate to war mode and reap benefits.
I'm still not 100% sure on what those benefits are, because some people seem to be thinking there's going to be just passive benefits, which if it's the case, then yeah, you can, if you're able to level up on the first day, which actually this time it sounds like I will be able to, because for the first time ever it's during my holidays. I'm not going to encounter any enemy players while I level up. It's day 2. It's the poor sods who have to still level up on day 2 that will find that.
Yeah.
But I would have thought it would just be bonuses to when you engage in actual world PvP. But I don't know. I mean, at least we get slightly bigger bags this time round. If we can, I don't know how expensive they're going to be.
Do we?
Yeah. There's 32. What was it? Can't remember now. There's 32. There's 30 and 32 slot bags on the tailoring patterns. Last time I checked. What's our biggest one at the moment?
Well, we're going to need them if that Azerite change goes through.
So that's another 8 slots potentially, but it might be obviously quite expensive to start with. I don't know. Let's have a look. We've had 30. Yeah, I thought the 30 was the most. So there's definitely a 32 one there.
Did we really have 30? Jeez.
Yeah, that was in WoD. We haven't had anything extra in Legion, as far as I remember. Although I haven't really leveled up my tailor, but I was pretty sure when I was playing about with it in Legion Alpha and Beta. There's other. I mean, the various professions do make some interesting stuff. Like tailors also make cloaks with a couple of bonuses on them. Can't remember. I think I've forgotten what they are now. And engineers can make weapons. So there are some more interesting things from different professions. Like leather workers can make a diving suit. There's 2 parts to it. There's a diving suit and there's a helmet. One of them allows you to breathe underwater. One of them allows you faster swim speed.
Yeah, and well, I mean, for me, as far as professions are concerned, if they don't do something similar to what they did in Burning Crusade with like weapons for blacksmiths, then I don't care about professions. Like they're just meaningless to me.
Well, I'm an enchanter, so I at least get to turn my gear into more than the vendor price for it. When I know I'm going to do
that's true. That's at least useful.
They also hinted at crafted Azerite armor. I mean, there's nothing in yet, but it wouldn't surprise me because why not? I mean, it's going to be available as quest rewards. I don't see why it wouldn't be available as crafted pieces as well. We had crafted relics. I mean, they weren't useful for very long, but they were there.
Yeah, they were basically the only item that couldn't be upgraded with Obliterum. That was something.
So, but you know, so yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. But at the moment, professions are just in a ramshackle state. I mean, there were the item levels all over the place. There's like level capped epic items that are like lower item level than your quest rewards at level 110. So, you know, that, I mean, I assume they've got a much more complete build that they're holding on to at the moment, but I can't really tell what it's going to be like. The Mad Merchant sells a 34 slot, isn't that? I think that's unique though, isn't it? And extremely expensive. But I mean, I always find as you know, as a paladin, even, I mean, I've only played Ret in Legion and I've already got my bags full of crap. Although I always carry around stuff for Prot and Heat and Holy, just in case anyone's foolish enough to ask me to play them. Occasionally people have asked me to tank. They don't usually do it a second time, but occasionally. So I'm going to have to do the same for Azerite gear as well. As well as all the stuff I need for individual fights.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some Azerite pieces that you're going to have to mix and match, I think. But hopefully it's not too drastic. My hope is that it's not so impactful that it destroys the balance in the talent tree, which is a very real possibility.
Yes.
But I'd hope they err more on the passive side, like, the cooldown reduction on Crusader Strike, for example. Or you get 2 more seconds on Crusade or Avenging Wrath. Something small, but, it's there.
I worry if they do something like that to Crusade, though, that they end up bunging it into must take in all situations territory again, like in Legion. But I appreciate what you say. The fact that you could change how a baseline ability works, and you create an imbalance in a talent row.
Yeah.
That means you no longer have a sensible choice to make, or choice is the wrong word. Variety. So changing between different fights.
Yeah, there should be a variety in what we choose. I mean, the talents are pretty distinct, and they do have meaningful differences between them this time.
Yes. So. I would say, all of the talents seem to have some use somewhere. I mean, Selfless Healer is one I'm not a fan of, but, plenty of people likes the fact it was added in.
I'm pretty convinced Selfless Healer, should anything happen to Word of Glory, will be the go-to talent regardless of what you do. I think Justicar's Vengeance is totally dead in the water now. There's no real reason to use it at all. Like, why would you waste Holy Power on a heal that isn't much stronger than what Selfless Healer is?
Well, exactly. Well, the thing with a Selfless Healer is I found, I mean, they might have to increase the duration of the stacks a bit, because Judgment has such a long cooldown that at leveling haste levels at least, and I don't know what we're going to end up like level cap, sometimes touch and go whether you get to keep it.
Yeah, I think Judgment being tied to Selfless Healer is just an artifact of the past when, Judgment had like a 6-second cooldown? Less than that?
It was I think it was 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was really good for, I mean, I used to love it for Long of the Law, as I say. I remember Garrelon, the big bug in Heart of Fear? I used to be able to use that to jump from leg to leg.
Yeah, that was nice.
So let's have a look what's we've got. Azerite armor will only be in 3 slots, so maybe crafters will be able to create a decent piece for one of those 3 slots. We say decent, obviously they want us to go into dungeons, so I'm guessing it's not going to be better than something that's available in at least in the dungeons. I would think. I mean, I was still wondering if they might make some pieces specifically for mythic raids. So, like, you've got your leveling stuff, which will just be some trash, passive stuff. Maybe crafted stuff, which would be on a par with that, but, different. And then dungeon stuff, which will be significantly more interesting, shall we say. And then raid stuff, more so. And then, because I just had it in my head, because Ian Hazakostas was talking about making sure that mythic raids remains a strong enough incentive to be worth the much, much greater hassle, that maybe we might get some mythic raid specific, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I haven't paid much attention to that.
I don't think anyone's really asked. But I would think at least the dungeon stuff must be better than solo sources of it, and raid stuff would be stuff you want above and beyond the item level.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that was mentioned in the interview recently. I mean, I briefly skimmed over it. Somebody mentioned that, items from raids would be stronger, at least as far as their Azerite powers are concerned.
Yeah.
Than whatever came before it from another part of the game.
I mean, the only danger potentially is, just like we had with tier, the potential arms race from tier to make sure we want to use the latest stuff, although with it not Titan forging, I guess item level will help with that one as well. Yeah,
no Titan forging is probably the best thing about the whole system.
Yeah.
Even if it's limited.
Someone's asking here, how are you enjoying the allied races?
think I made a Nightborn Priest, and I leveled it to like level 30 and noped out.
Yeah, well, I did a Void Elf Priest. It's on level 40 something, and then I got into Alpha, so there it has remained.
Yeah,
I do.
I just don't have the time for it.
Well, yeah. Well, especially I keep trying to think about how long. I keep trying to get someone to tell me how long is it taking you to get from 0 to 110, so I can get the heirloom armor. Is it going to be worth it? Because I'm not sure. Because I don't think it's. I mean, I was all for zone scaling, but I think the overall experience for me, anyway, seems to have got worse. Has it been asked? We have discussed Divine Hammer, but just to quickly recap, basically, if Divine Hammer were to come back, it would be in place of Consecration. So it's all dependent upon which seems to be the better one. But you know, I just think one like ace in the hole is the fact that a lot of people seem to like Consecration as just a. In fact, I still get lots of people saying to me, "Oh, they should make it baseline," which would be my idea of hell. I mean, I took a big break after tier 7 because I thought, you know, in Wrath I got to level cap, and then 3 days later I'd killed all the raid bosses, and I thought, what? And it was just achievements then, and I thought, because I at that time I wasn't really looking ahead at what was coming. And I thought, oh, is this what World of Warcraft is now? You do the raid in a week, and then it's achievements. So I quit the game just before Ulduar, which turned out to be a mistake, but there you go. And I didn't come back until the end of Cataclysm. And I came back into this horror show of all these new abilities, but it included... Because before we had Consecration, but it was too expensive mana-wise to use it. But all of a sudden in Cataclysm, although mana wasn't, you know... wasn't as straightforward as it is now, you could still run out of it, but you could still afford the mana to use Consecration. I found it horrendous fitting everything in. I thought it was a horrible ability to have, so I was quite pleased when it was sort of effectively removed, albeit via talents.
I think times have changed though with Consecration. You know, it's holy power generation now, much longer cooldown, shorter duration. The effect is way stronger than it ever was.
Well, yes, yeah, it's certainly a lot better in the BFA, you know, iteration.
And you know, that's another thing. You know, the difference between Consecration and Divine Hammer. Divine Hammer doesn't generate any more holy power. You know,
no.
That extra 3 holy power per minute can actually be meaningful.
Oh, if you can make a party with a tank and healer to dungeon spam, yeah, well. If I was... I mean, I'll probably level my priest just by getting my paladin to boost it through dungeon still, or even with the XP nerf. Because they can't nerf the quest XP. Was Exorcism removed? Exorcism was removed for Legion. And Blade of Justice brought in for its place. I think, you know, to my mind, I would have preferred it, I suppose. I was thinking, well, why couldn't they just change Blade of Justice, or change Exorcism to what Blade of Justice is now? But I guess it's because Blade of Justice is physical damage, and there was no way they were going to... I mean, as it is, we don't do that much of our damage as non-holy anyway. And obviously, if they made that ability holy, it'd be like almost no damage is physical. But
yeah, I really don't understand why they removed Exorcism in Legion. It was probably the worst mistake they've made, I think, as far as class fantasy goes. I mean, that was the big focus, right?
Yeah.
And the most impactful thing they could think of was Virtue's Blade for, you know, a Blade of Justice talent. It's like, what?
Well, yes, even at very high crit levels, it was not worthwhile.
Yeah. You know, they could have at least put Exorcism in there as a holy damage range variant of Blade of Justice, you know? I just add some flavor.
Yeah, I mean, I just got in my head they must have some issue with... Because Blade of Justice, although is not as long range as Exorcism without the glyph was, it's still a ranged ability, sort of, you know, mid-range ability. So I just had it, you know, the obvious thing would have been to have just made Exorcism do the damage that Blade of Justice does with the 12-yard thing. But obviously they must have had it in their head they want a powerful physical damage dealing ability. They wanted it to be physical. It's all I could think of. And yet, because there were various talents they tried for it, weren't there? It included an early version of Blade of Wrath where, didn't it do like holy dot damage or something as well?
Yeah, that was actually in Legion up until 7.1.5, I believe. Yeah, it was it was holy, and it did holy damage.
Yeah, so I didn't, if that wasn't the reason, I didn't understand why would they get rid of Exorcism when it was one thing to get rid of Blade of Wrath. At least they had a reason. I didn't think it was a good reason, but at least they had a reason. But to my mind, they didn't have any reason to get rid of Exorcism and yet bring in an ability with a different name that we've never seen before that does what Exorcism could have done. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What do we think of the increase in levels but no extra talent points? I mean, Blizzard they've answered that one by basically saying as we level up, we'll be getting new bits of Azerite armor, which we will. We're just not at the moment. So there's at least 2 quests per zone, I think, if I remember rightly, where you will get a reward that is Azerite armor. At the moment, it's just, pieces of chest, shoulders, or helm with primary stats on them. But those are
no secondary stats. Yeah. It's very strange.
But those are intended, to be Azerite pieces. So, if you think of, you would probably say it seems to work out about roughly, depends on how you quest, of course, every level and a half. And then, of course, you could be doing dungeons as well. I've had, again, similar pieces from dungeons that are just these things that occupy Azerite armor pieces with only primary stats, which I'm guessing, or I'm fairly sure, are intended to be Azerite armor pieces. So, but I know they've said that at PAX, that is the intention.
It's strictly primary stats.
Well, they didn't say that, but it is. No, what they've said is that is intended to be the reward for leveling up.
Ah, gotcha.
Because we're not getting anything else. Like, we haven't had anything for a while. I mean, WoD, we had every 2 levels some buff to an ability. But, so they can't give us new abilities. They've already gone over the reasons for that. So it's basically, and we can't have talents because the talents changed. So their answer is, well, you'll find yourself as you're leveling up getting new pieces of Azerite armor. Which, now that here's the real question though. I suppose it's not a big deal for leveling because that's only something that's going to take you several days. But you could end up with a situation where you're leveling, you've got a Azerite chest piece, shoulder piece, helm, and then you get into level 116 or something, and you get, say, another helm. It's higher item level, but you don't necessarily believe that the traits are any better. So then you'll have people scratching their head about which one they keep.
Yeah, I think that's just a problem of quest reward design.
Yeah.
Realistically, they should offer all 3 pieces as a quest reward, like a helm, shoulders, and chest.
Do. Yeah, the quests that do, they do that. But what I mean
really?
is, let's say you've... Oh, yeah. So all of the quests that give you these secondary statless pieces all give you a choice of helm, shoulder, or chest, as far as I've been able to tell anyway. But I have done all the zones now.
Okay, then that's a lot less terrible than I thought.
So you do get the choice on that regard. But you could still have a situation where you've got 3 pieces of Azerite armor equipped, and then you're being given a higher item level one because you're now higher level. And you don't know whether the, 10 item levels upgrade or 15 item levels upgrade is worth it for the traits, if the traits look a bit crap or something.
Got it.
But that's just one of those leveling problems that goes away as soon as you get to level cap, go into dungeons anyway. It's like the problem I usually have. When do I get rid of my tier pieces? I agonise over it more than I should do because it's always going to be much better gear than I need to level regardless of what I do.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting question. As going from tier to tier, trying to evaluate if an Azerite piece, is actually an upgrade.
Yeah, I mean that's where there will be issues, and that's where, as I say, I just worry about a potential arms race with Blizzard, making sure they. I mean, in Legion they've nerfed previous tier bonuses, haven't they, to try and make sure that the next ones are ones you'd want to take.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well. In
Well,
actually most cases, I think.
I've still got 2 pieces of tier 20 because I can't get. I can now get removing them and putting on my legendary cloak to be about the same in terms of sims.
Oh wow.
But that's because we've not been killing bosses that drop the tier piece I still need. I don't have any mythic tier shoulders or helm, so that's limiting me a little bit.
Oh, that's
But
that's crazy.
that's just my problem. It's not anyone else's. But nonetheless, the fact that we've been going for these 6 set bonuses is obviously something they can forget about now for BFA. But the extra problem is, like we just said there, is you might end up with going, oh well, I'm going to keep my Azerite from that piece because this traits are way better than this. But
Yeah,
at least we won't
I
have to
mean,
worry about getting
the way I
time
see it, we're just trading the devil we know for the devil we don't.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a shit show on its own.
Well, you're saying there, Zerocor, people wondering which one to take. Well, I think we've already improved the training of people to sim stuff now.
Yeah.
It was a big hassle, I think, at the start of Legion, because people just wanted these bislists. I think more people are now accept the fact that you don't have bislists, and with raid bots, raid bots 2.0 technically, that makes it a whole lot easier as well. So, but it's just going to be more of the same, isn't it? It's going to be which is best. Well, sim it. Because it could also depend on your talents as well. If you're like determined to use a particular set of talents, then that's going to impact your Azerite armor choices potentially.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is with the talent layout we actually have now, it's actually pretty reasonably balanced. Like there's no real cookie cutter build right now, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I noted what I've got at the moment on the screen there is what I was using a bit earlier. Now, for leveling purposes, I sort of definitely take Wake of Ashes over Divine Judgment just because it just help for most of what I kill. It helps me a lot better, and I take. I was trying Inquisition. The problem with that is I keep forgetting about it. So until I'm tracking it properly, I keep forgetting to use it. I also keep forgetting that Judgment generates a holy power. So I keep using it when I've got 5 holy power. But
it's fundamentally it's a really different play style, but it flows better, despite the open GCDs that we now have.
Well, also changing your talents does also change the way you play a bit as well. So there is a bit to think about sometimes. Do we think mobility will be improved anytime soon?
I don't know, but I hope so. I'm hopeful. I mean, they've made a lot of positive changes over BFA, so I think, looking at Divine Steed and maybe making, allowing Divine Steed to be a snare break and an immunity over its duration could be something they could do, and maybe some changes to Cavalier to make it a little more attractive in light of Unbreakable Spirit and Eye for an Eye.
Because in the here and now, what they've done is they've increased the cooldown on Divine Steed and Blessing of Freedom. So mobility at the moment is worse than...
Yeah.
Then again, supposedly it is for a lot of other classes as well.
Well, it doesn't mean they shouldn't try and make it better.
Well, no. I mean, I noticed they gave rogues, outlaw rogues, I don't think even rogues... Well, they certainly didn't ask for it, and they don't. I think a lot of them don't even want it. A charge, effectively, new ability Blade Rush, which is basically a charge, and it's on the same row as like Shadow Step. No, not Shadow Step. Can't remember. Something else that does a similar thing, but yeah, I mean that they've given them a movement speed they didn't even bloody well ask for. Give Paladins a Holy Leap type ability. Well, I mean, this is the thing I always say. When they always talk about, Heroic Leap and Charge being fundamentally warrior fantasy things, all I can say is when you watch all the cinematics, Tyrion Fordring charged the Lich King, and he also did a Heroic Leap on the Lich King. I've never seen a warrior character do either of those abilities in any cinematic, in-game or otherwise.
Terralion also did the same thing in some quest chains. Yes. If you did, yeah. It's totally inconsistent.
So quite frankly, as far as the story, you know, whichever team deals with storyline and cinematics, they think it's a paladin ability. There's some fundamental disagreement between the teams at Blizzard.
God. I don't want to hear that.
They could give us the falling sword ability like Templars from Diablo 3. Didn't they take enough from Diablo 3? I'm hesitant to suggest such things, given that apparently the developer chiefly concerned with Ret Paladins came from Diablo 3. Because isn't Divine Steed the fault of Diablo 3?
Yep.
So,
yes, it is.
Terralion also has a leap. Yes, he does. I don't know that Terralion was stealthing so much as just being sneaky. I think he was just being quiet. Anyway, what do you mean Paladin's got Ashbringer? We're not keeping it for very long.
Yeah, that's a real tragedy. I almost call it a travesty that fucking Legion, the expansion where we get Ashbringers, where our playstyle went to shit.
Yes. Well, at least we were fairly useful. I mean, I felt relatively useful in most of the... Not so much Tomb of Sargeras.
I didn't even really raid through Tomb of Sargeras. I hated it so much.
I used to cause confusion in Mythic Plus, though. Particularly, it seemed to happen quite a lot in... I can't remember the name of the dungeon now. I've forgotten it. The Keep, and where you would occasionally hit an undead and it would turn into ash, and you get people going, what's happened to that mob? It was on like half health.
Yeah, that was a neat bit of fantasy right there.
Unfortunately, it never did it to a demon boss. Divine Steed wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the ever-increasing cooldown of the global. I mean, the global, you know, I mean, I've already said that, I've bored people to death with it. I just don't think movement speed or defensive should be on the global cooldown. But
yeah, Divine Steed in particular. I mean, it's already 3 seconds. Like,
yeah,
come on.
I know.
Why is it on the GCD? I've never seen a good argument for why it should be. You know, almost every other class's movement speed abilities, especially like sprints, are off the GCD. So, what's the deal with Divine Steed?
I don't get that. I mean, I wasn't totally convinced. I was trying to think about it. Because as far as I was concerned, it was just a reworked. Oh God, what's it called now? Speed of Light. So Speed of Light used to be a 70% speed increase, I think, for like 6 or 7 seconds or something, and then we changed to 100% speed increase for 3 seconds. I was never quite sure which one I preferred, but it should certainly be off the GCD, because otherwise it's just delay. It just means if you're in a raid and you know you're gonna have to move out, you just have to do it like a second earlier to make start moving out and then press it.
Yeah, it's janky, really. Shouldn't be like that at all.
Let's have a look. Do we find it annoying that right now you have Wake of Ashes in BFA, you need to spec into it? I mean, they're not going to make it baseline. I mean, it was the first, you know, before they made all these changes, you know, one of the things I said is I consider it to be impactful enough to be worth making baseline. But
yeah, especially with the talents it's competing with.
Yeah. But they're not going to, are they? So there's, I think, a case of focusing on what they might do. I really don't think they're up for making that baseline. They might be willing to make Hammer of Wrath baseline. That's probably the best one to push.
Yeah, even Hammer of Wrath, I'm not convinced it'll ever go baseline. I think the best thing that'll ever happen to it is that it's exclusively an execute.
Well,
I don't like that it's tied to wings and it's on a different talent tier with Crusade.
I don't mind the wings. What I mind is, as we said before, the fact that you might not use it when it's available. So if making it an execute only and, you know, boosting its damage is the way to achieve that, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, yeah. It's basically what you need to do.
Curious. Solsacra hasn't got You can't use that word here. I'm pretty sure Solsacra doesn't have a gnome, because apart from anything else, he's a horde player.
Yeah, no, I don't.
There we go. Getting a cast time for Divine Steed after BFA. So a cast time? So we can see the animation of us taking the horse out of our bag. Yes, very good. No. No, we're just being silly now. So what I'll do, I'll just open it, usually last round about this time, so I'll just open it out. If anyone's got any other questions or things they want to bring out, then speak in the next minute, or forever hold your peace, or at least until the next time we do one of these. And then we'll call it a day there.
All right.
We'll just give it a bit, because obviously a bit of a delay.
Yeah. Good old Twitch.
Yeah. Can paladins customize their wheelchairs now? You want to talk about black dragons before I log? Well, I'll do that in the chat then when I turn it off, because I don't want to just put this straight up onto YouTube. So there we go. It looks like we've got we've gone through everything that people wanted to bring up. So thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Thanks particularly to Solsacra for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. And, well, I guess in a few weeks' time we might know more if they're going to be bringing out what they're going to call beta. That should be much more close to what they want it to be when it all goes live. So maybe in another, I don't know, maybe during May sometime it might be worth doing it again. But anyway, thanks for coming on, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.
See you.